So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar by Phrase. Today we are doing the introduction to Phrase TMS, which stands for Translation Management System. And specifically we are looking at the role of a project manager and how they work with Phrase TMS. So welcome and thank you for joining us and for taking the time. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. It's Alicia Kosh, our Enterprise Solution Architect. Hi, Alicia, how are you?
Hi, Clara, nice. I'm doing really good. Nice to be here.
Great. So thank you for, in advance, thank you for doing the demo. We are excited to see it. And here is Alicia's agenda for today. So she is going to start by showing you how to manage your resources in Phrase TMS. Then how to add and manage users, how to create a project, upload jobs, and also she's going to touch on the linguist's view, which is obviously not the focus of today, but she will touch on that a little bit as well. We will have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to submit your questions via Slido. Okay. So now I will stop sharing my screen and over to you, Alicia.
Thank you again, Clara. Hello, everybody. So I'm so excited to be here today to talk to you about Phrase TMS and give you a tour from the perspective of a project manager. I myself come from a project manager background working with several different translation management systems over the years. So my goal today is really to, showcase the elements within Phrase TMS that are very important to the project managers, right? As Clara mentioned. So first things first, what is a TMS? A TMS is a translation management system, right? And it's a type of software used to to manage and automate the localization and translation of documents with text, right? So that could be documents such as Word files, InDesign files, PowerPoint files, also to handle web-based files such as HTML or XML, and even software string resource files for the localization of software strings. So I'm going to share my screen and get right to Phrase TMS. Clara, if you can just give me the okay that you can see my screen and everything looks good.
Yeah, all looks good.
Okay, let me just move this down here. Okay, great. All right, so here I am right now on my Phrase Suite dashboard. Phrase TMS is part of Phrase Suite, right? And Phrase TMS is formerly known as MemSource, as some of you might already be familiar with. We also have Phrase Strings for the localization of software keys. I did want to highlight now that my colleague Vasilis is giving a webinar next week on Phrase Strings, which is next Thursday, I believe. So please feel free to sign up for that as well. Okay. So again, Phrase TMS is for the translation of unstructured content, and Strings is for your structured content, right? So these two platforms work together as part of Phrase Suite. So let's review Phrase TMS interface. Okay, so here is your dashboard with your projects and jobs list that you have access to see as a project manager. There are certain access levels that can be granted to different PM users to see certain projects for certain clients or certain business units, right? So there are some filtering options as well. So you can see your projects list. We have a filter option here so you can set your columns and you can toggle these on and off depending on what you'd like to see. In addition, we have this filter option here where you can set and save different views, right? So depending on what you need to see to conduct your daily projects. So first things first, everything within TMS revolves around a project, right? A translation project ties in your translation resources. So those are your linguistic assets, such as your translation memories, your term bases, MT engines, machine translation engines, right? If that's part of your localization strategy. And also you can assign your translation providers and map your workflows. So let's just dig into a project real quick here. So this is my project's overview. For this project, you can see metadata up above surrounding my source and target languages, and then additional metadata related to the project. On my dashboard view here, you can see the overall process of your translation project. So for this one, I have translation, QA, and QC implementation as part of my workflow steps. Further down are my jobs. So all of jobs are contained with an actual translation project within TMS, and a job relates to a file and a language pair. So each job you can use to assign to different translation providers and set the deadline you want them completed by, depending on workflow step. So you can toggle between your different workflow steps here. In my progress bar here, you can see that the translation's already been completed, and now I'm on to my QA, my quality assessment step. But I'm still waiting, and you can see it's flagging here that there's one that's been accepted but has not started the actual translation yet. So I'm going to get into this in a bit more detail once we talk about project creation. And I want to show also how easy it is to work with your vendors and translation providers, or even your in-house linguists, right? If that's part of your process today. So again, this is your project. The jobs are related to the files and the languages that you have within your translation project. Your analysis is the word count analysis based on the documents you've uploaded for translation. You can have various quotes associated with your translation project. So buyer quotes, so who submitted the translation project, and also your provider quotes, so your linguists. And here's where the translation memories and term bases tie in as well. So as I mentioned, I'm going to get into that in a bit more detail, but I do want to mention there are 3 different ways to get content in the TMS for translation, right? And to create an actual translation project. So first way is to create a project manually. So you can click on this plus icon here, click new to create a project, and you can upload a file from your desktop, or you can pull it from a connected repository, such as Google Drive or OneDrive, for example. You can also use a submitter portal, right? So this is a portal where your clients can send projects, or even you can, as a project manager, can use the submitter portal within the TMS to submit content to the TMS. So a submitter portal is linked to an actual project template with predefined settings. So I'm going to show that when we get into actual project creation. We also have another option called automated project creation. So we can set up this automation layer that will monitor a file repository or a content management system, for example, and anytime a change is made or a file is uploaded, it will be detected and a new project will automatically be created in TMS, or it can be added to an existing job. So that's what we call continuous localization. And that's what's, I find one of the neatest experience as a project manager working in Phrase TMS is that continued localization and that automated project creation that really does speed up the translation process and makes your life, much easier as a project manager. And then in addition, we do have several out-of-the-box connectors and integrations that work to transfer content from other platforms to the TMS. Okay, so I'm going to talk about all the translation resources now that tie into a project, and then get into the details. But before I do that, I do want to introduce you to our help widget called Phraser. So Phraser suggests Help Center articles based on your input, right? The questions that you add here. And it adds, can give you suggestions of links to different Help Center articles. And the Help Center I found is a really great resource with step-by-step instructions on certain features and how things work within Phrase TMS if you're, have any confusions as you're going about your daily work. You can also use it to report a bug, for example. So another thing to highlight is you'll sometimes see on-screen instructions within with links to the Help Center on your UI here. So I'm going to try to point those out as I go through the tour of Phrase TMS. Okay, so let's review the translation resources that tie into a translation project. Most important, here's my menu bar here with all my resources. And here you can see my recent projects list so I can access them quickly. So translation memories. Yeah, so a translation memory is a database of previously translated content, and it's broken down to a segment level. So think of it as a sentence or phrase level. And the way it works is at the beginning of a translation project, the translation memory is run against your document to see if there's any matches from that translation memory, right? That translation memory database. If so, it will apply and pre-translate those matches to your document. Then after the translation is completed, it will update the translation memory with the translations from your document, thus growing the translation memory for future use, right? So it builds over time. And the idea with this is that it leads to translation consistency, quality, and also cost savings, right? So you're not getting charged by your linguist, or your customers are not having to repay for the same text over and over again. So depending on your strategy, you can organize your translation memories according to domain or language pairs, or even have all of them lead to a master TM. So I'm going to click into my master TM here. And you can see right off the bat, I have my languages that are within this translation memory. So my source language is English, and I have various target languages. I have the ability to search very easily within the translation memory from this view. So let me see here, search for this. And you can see, actually, I have this already predefined. I can set my columns and the language pairs I want to see when I do my search. So if I select all, you can see all of the languages that have a match from the translation memory will appear here. Also, if I just want to select one language, I can do so, and it'll filter accordingly. I can see when it was created and last modified. I can edit directly within the actual translation segment as well. Okay. Further down, I can see all the related projects that have utilized this translation memory in a translation project. And I have different import and export settings. So to create a new translation memory, or to import existing translation memories into one you've already created in TMS, you can import here and choose the file. And there's some import options here. So you can import as TMX, XLIF, Excel, and SDL-XLIF as well. Additionally, you can export your translation memory content at any time in the translation memory exchange format, which is the industry standard format, right, for translation memory exchange, as well as Excel. So once you select that as well, you can select your language pairs and what languages that you want to export as part of that. And you can also select additional metadata according to, how you want to export it. So when it was last modified, for example, maybe by associated with a certain domain. Okay. And we also have an alignment tool right directly within translation memory. So if you have a lot of content that's already been translated and has not been imported into a translation memory previously, you can select your source file and your translated file and align those two documents, and it will break it down again on a segment by segment basis. And then you'll have, maybe one of your linguists check the alignment and make sure it looks okay. And then you update it into your translation memory. We also offer the option of bulk import as well. So there's more information about that in our help center. All right, so that's translation memories. Let's talk about term bases. All right. So term bases is different than a translation memory. So think of a term base as a glossary of company terminology that are word-based, right? So terms that might be unique to your industry, such as product names. So they ensure that translations are correct and designated terms are displayed in the web editor as part of the translation process. So let me click into one of my term bases here, my marketing term base. And similar to the translation memory, you can see I have all the languages associated with this term base. I can also search directly within the term base. So let me see here. And it will display the terms that match. If I actually click into a term, I can add a synonym, and I can also create a new term or add one on the fly. But going back, I want to click into my English term here. And you can see I have several different options and attributes to a term that can provide additional context to those who are viewing these terms in the editor. So first is the metadata related to the term itself, such as the term status, for example. You can select if it's a preferred or forbidden term. And once you set that too, you can add that as part of your QA checks. So if a forbidden term is used in the translation process, it'll be flagged during that quality assurance step or during those QA checks in the CAT editor. You can set a part of speech, the gender, number, adding additional notes. And then further down, you can look at the concept, right? So it's a concept level surrounding the term, and that's available to all languages that are using this term. So it gives that additional context for the linguist as they're going through the translation process. Okay. All right, let's talk about machine translation. So machine translation, if that's part of your translation process and strategy today, there are a couple different options to work with MT engines within TMS. One is the traditional setup. So if you're already using a translation or a machine translation provider, under settings and integrations, you can go to machine translation engines and add an existing machine translation engine. So this is something you would already have a subscription to, or a license to. So part of that you would just simply create, and you can see we have several options available here. You would just need to enter in, either your, let me see here, your username, password, your API key, so on and so forth. And then once that's enabled within TMS, you can add that engine to part of your translation workflow and your pre-translation settings. Another option is an add-on to Phrase TMS called Phrase Translate. So I'm going to go ahead and click into my Phrase Translate profile. And what Phrase Translate is a machine translation aggregator. And when we have a Phrase Translate enabled, the profile uses AI to evaluate the text and will run a domain classification to understand what the content is about. So for example, is it a medical text, a legal text, a financial text, right? And based on the job's domain and language, it'll look at the MT engines that are enabled in my Phrase Translate profile and pick the ones that has the best results. So within my profile, I can enable and disable certain MT engines, or I can add additional MT engines as well. All right. We also, Phrase Translate is now fully equipped with Phrase NextMT, which is our proprietary generic neural MT engine. And what NextMT does is it uses translation memory matches from your translation memory rather than starting completely from scratch, right? Like other generic MT engines would do. So if you have TM matches that would yield fuzzy matches, NextMT can leverage those and give you back something that is a lot closer than basically how your links would typically translate, right? So the idea is quality improvement and speed improvement. And really that's because, this is our system and we have granular access to this data. So in our upcoming cadence release, Phrase NextMT has a lot of additional features that are soon to be released, so stay tuned. I also wanted to mention MT glossaries here. So by enabling a machine translation glossary in your Phrase Translate profile, you can ensure that all the MT engines apply your preferred translation for specific words and phrases. So again, it helps improve the quality and consistency of your machine translation output. Okay, just move this over here. And then I just wanted to show as well under my Phrase Translate profile is my MT usage tab. So this will give you the details of your machine translation usage over the last 30 days. So once this loads here, you can see which auto select, right? So this was this month, it selected DeepBell's my main machine translation engine, but you can view these statistics here. All right. Moving right along. We only have an hour, so I'm trying to get through it all. There's so many great features of Phrase TMS. So Phrase Analytics, let's talk about that. This is where you have access to comprehensive reports and to track key metrics with Phrase Analytics. I did want to mention now that there's also a dedicated webinar on the website related to Phrase Analytics and Advanced Analytics. So if you want to check that out on our website, please do, because I'm not going to go into a lot of detail today. But out of the box, you do get access as a project manager to these first few items. So the volume, right? Word count volume over a given period of time, language pair by project owner or by translation provider, client, right? You also have your on-time delivery statistics. So this is a big one for project managers. I know in my experience that was a big one. And the nice thing about Phrase Analytics is that anytime you can export this data in these different formats here, and especially like an image file, and you can pop it into a QBR deck, right? When you're having to go through your quarterly business reviews and report on your translation spend and data and your quality report, right? We also have language quality assessment. I'm going to show that in a moment as part of the translation process. So you can see if you're using LQA as part of your profile. Let me remove this filter. the LQA errors by category and severity, right? Based on how you've set that. So you can see all this data here. Costs, right? Costs are a big one. What's your financial spend? And you have different filtering options here. So what are your costs by linguist, by month, by client, by project, by language pair? It provides you with all that data here. Savings and leverage, right? So what are your projected savings by utilizing translation memory and machine translation as part of your process? Let me remove this off this filter. So you can see my savings by using machine translation is quite a bit by month, and you can also see machine translation and additional options here. And then again, finally, machine translation, translation memory leverage, right? What's my output based on this criteria listed here? So there's a lot you can do. And if these basic out of the box reports, if you're looking for something more customized or specific, we also do have the advanced analytics where you can provide a self-service reporting solution with customizable charts and dashboards to create reports according to your specific business needs. So I've created these specific to myself, and you can adjust these. So for more information, please do check out the webinar on our website. And finally, let's get into the submitter portal because I want to show you a round trip of a project and how it's created. So the submitter portal is for your customers or internal colleagues or different, business units within an organization to request and submit translations, right? So here I already have one set up, and this is for, it's linked to a project template and it can contain pre-configured settings. So once a file is submitted, it's automatically created. So I know, okay, well, the last thing I did want to cover before I actually submit a project is user creation. And I think we have enough time. User creation here. This is my user list. So depending on your project manager access rights, you can create users and you can set different user access rights here. So first things first, every TMS organization needs to have one administrator account. An administrator can perform all the functions, and as I mentioned, each organization needs to have one. A project manager role is slightly elevated. Let me click into my role here and click edit. And you can see here is the information surrounding, username and email. And from here, I can set different access rights. So if you have one project manager super user, they can create users and then they can adjust other project managers to have different levels of access. So if you want them to be able to create projects and project templates, you can set those options here. You can also only grant them access to see projects or create projects of certain selected clients, right, or accounts within your TMS organization. So similar project templates. Also, as your project manager will, as you're creating these, do they have ability to create translation memories? Can they view translation memories created by other users? And you can also set the TMs of selected clients of which they can have access to. Okay. Similar with term bases. So there's a lot of different options here as far as access rights for the different project manager roles within your organization. Here you can have the ability to let this project manager create users or not, create new clients, and also to create vendors, for example. I'm going to show you vendors in just a moment. And similar to what I just showed you with the analytics dashboards, you can grant them access to see all the data within TMS or only by, a certain user or just view none of the data. So there's a lot of options. Let's talk about the linguist role. So let me click into Joe here. So this is Joe. He's got his profile here, and here are all the jobs that he's worked on for me as part of my TMS organization. When you're creating a linguist role, again, similar username and password and email, you have additional options. So if you want them to be able to edit translation memory and term bases, you can set that here. You can also set a price list associated to them. So what are their costs for translation? And you'll see that in your project as well. Additionally, we do have, and let me go back to my users, we do have a guest role. And a guest role is limited to what projects they can see, if they can, be a super user just to come into the TMS to edit translation memories and term bases, for example. Or if you're just a high level, you're the leader, you're a team lead of your organization, you just want to check in and view all the projects, you can have this guest user here as well. All right. So that's, your basic users. You can add project managers, your linguist roles. So linguist would be associated with your either in-house translation team, with your freelance providers. If you are working, however, with an LSP or a vendor, so an LSP, a language service provider, we do have several partnerships already with some of the larger LSPs, and they already use Phrase TMS. So we have a solution or offering, right, that has the options for 2 organizations having their own Phrase TMS subscription to cooperate. So one organization adds the other organization as a vendor, and that way the vendor organization will get access to all the projects and jobs shared with them by the buyer, right? So that's a sharing concept. So I have several, not several, a few language service providers here, but I can add additional ones. I would just need to have them give me their vendor token to their Phrase TMS, and then you can set, their price lists, their language pairs, what customers they're working on within your TMS organization, domain information, and then relevant workflow steps, right? So what are the workflow steps they're allowed to action when I share a project with them from my TMS organization? All right. Okay, I think we've covered all the main translation resources. We went over translation memory, we went over term bases, how to create users, we've gone over Phrase Translate, our machine translation aggregator. We've covered Phrase Analytic, which is your statistics and reporting. Now let's create a project and see how that all ties in. So first things first, let me go to the submitter portal. As I mentioned previously, there's several different ways to create a project within TMS. One can be automated project creation as part of your continuous localization process. Another way is for you as a project manager to manually create a project, right? Another way is via the submitter portal. Another is from one of our out-of-the-box connectors or integrations. So today I'm going to submit a project using the customer portal. I'm going to select my language pairs that I want translated, and I'm going to select my translation service. So for this one, I already have marketing translation as the service for translation. So from here, I can copy and paste text for translation. I can load files directly from my desktop. I can also add from an online repository. So I've already had my Google Drive and my GitHub repositories connected to the submitter portal. So the nice thing about this is once you upload a file for translation from your connected repository, after the translations are completed, it'll automatically put those translation back within your file repository. So I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. I'm going to select my dog and cat cafe for translation. So while that's loading, I do have the ability to upload additional reference files for additional context for linguists. Further down, I can set my deadline that I want the translation completed by, so your time and your date. I can enter a purchase order number if that's part of my business requirements. Enter in a project name. So we're translating a deck about a dog and cat cafe, which are really popular these days. So let's keep that theme. If I could type. And any instructions, right, for your linguist or the project managers as you're submitting the project. Okay. And then as you saw, the summary, my cost summary was loading in the background based on this file. So again, a submitter portal is linked to a predefined project template that has my associated translation memories, machine translation engines, and it will quickly generate a word count analysis, apply it to the price list I already have pre-configured in my project template, and give me a cost estimate. So this one here is a minimum charge. But if there's a, if it's larger than however your price list is set, that will display here. So if everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and submit that. So similar to, other translation management systems, everything can be triggered by email notifications. So when a new project's created, you as a project manager can get notified. Alternatively, within TMS here, we have this notification setting here where you would get your, your alerts. So let me go ahead and refresh. And here is my project from the submitter portal. So you can see that's already been automatically created. And if I click in here, here's the metadata and project information I've entered in the submitter portal. And here are my translation steps. So in my project template, I've already set my translation providers, but if I wanted to reassign the translation step, and here I can also set my additional workflow steps here, I could basically click into the job and reassign it or assign it from scratch to a new provider that I have associated with my account. Okay. And then I can set the deadline that I want them to complete the actual translation job. Okay, I'm going to save that. You can see further down below here that I have my analysis. I've pre-configured this to determine my languages, the word count analysis based on my language pair. So if I click into one here, this is something, if you're familiar with the localization project or process and you're a project manager, this is something very familiar to you. You can see your word count analysis based on your net rate scheme for this specific customer or account within your TMS organization. And you can download that analysis as well in several different formats if necessary. Here are the quotes you saw, right, in the submitter portal. It was a minimum charge, but I can generate new quotes as well based on my provider and language pair. So this is something you can set as well, depending how you want to manage your costs, right? And your linguists cost as well. And then again, here are the translation memories that I have associated. So real quick, the nice thing about, I already have this preset in my project template settings, but if I click into my translation memory here within a project, I can add additional translation memories to my my project. And I think I have this set to only be for my marketing clients. So that's probably why my additional translation memories aren't displaying, but I can also define a priority order, right? So if I wanted to first search one translation memory before applying the other, I can do that. And I can also apply penalties here as well. Okay. And then, oh, I did want to mention read and write. So read means that, within this project, the translation memory is going to be applied, but it won't be updated after the translation is completed. If I do have write selected, then it will update those translations within my translation memory. Similar to term bases here, read is allowing the linguist only to view the term base matches, and they can't edit it. So there's different access levels you can put on your projects and also in your linguist settings, as I showed here in my user description. Let's get into a project template and how all these settings I've just showed you tie in. So if I'm creating a project from scratch or I'm utilizing a project template, I'd click on edit here. And here is our new project creation page. And you can set all these and make all these decisions here on, first of all, let's talk about machine translation engine. So for this one, I have Phrase Translate enabled, so that way it will determine the best machine translation engine for this file and use that in the translation process. But I can also select different MT engines per target language. So for French, for example, if I wanted to use simply DeepL for translation, I would select that here. So you have different options here as far as machine translation engines. Analysis, right? Here's you would make the decisions and set your access or what you need to include as part of the word count analysis, right? So what's coming from your translation memory? So you just saw the analysis from my translation memory just a moment ago. So here I can set what I want it to include, translation memory matches, if I want non-translatables included, for example, if I want certain items excluded, and how I want the analysis based on my source or target text. Next is pre-translation. This is a big one, right? So with pre-translation, you can set your threshold, right? So it's going to look at once it breaks the document for translation into a segment base, it's going to look at the matches in the translation memory. And depending on the threshold you set here, it will pull in those translation memory matches. So after the translation memory is applied to your document for translation, it will look at any additional empty segments, right, that don't have translation memory matches, and it will pre-translate it with your machine translation engine that's been enabled, right? So you have different options here as far as what you want displayed in the web editor. And I'm going to show you what the quality estimated machine translation matches are. Basically, they're confidence scores, right, of the effort required to edit the machine translation based on the output. You can make decisions around, how you want to handle auto propagation in the web editor. If you want to lock translation memory matches, especially those 100% in context matches. So that will prevent Linguist from editing those in the translation. There's some project status automation. So as a project manager, if you want to set how you want your project status to be automated, you can set those here. Quality assurance is a big one, right? And I'm going to show that in a moment in the editor. And yes, I think I have enough time to do so before Q&A. You can set your QA checks. So look for things like missing numbers, missing spaces, terminology. I wanted to check for any forbidden terms that might have been used by a linguist, right? I can check for formatting tag errors. That's a big one that comes up a lot, right? As part of the translation, sometimes linguists will delete tags by accident. So you can flag those in the QA check and they'll be prompted to edit those before they can complete the translation. And you can also add custom checks as well. All right, so let me just get through here. We have access and security rights. So you can prevent linguists from downloading their translation jobs. So if you wanted them to work directly within the web editor, you can do that. You can prevent them from editing certain segments. And then same with your vendors. If you're sharing a project or a job with your vendors, then you can set some access rights here as well. The financials, right? I'm going to skip through these. But financials is where you would set your price lists for, different word counts. Workflow is a big one, right? So you can add up to 15 workflow steps in a given project. So these were predefined, but if I wanted to, I can add additional workflow steps on a project that's already been created. And as a project manager, you have the ability to create your own workflow steps and name them whatever you would like, right? So whatever you're used to using internally, you can name your workflow steps accordingly. And then the continuous job option here is for that continuous localization process, right? So if you want TMS to monitor some source file for updates, you can set a frequency, and when a change is detected, as I mentioned before, to automatically update in TMS, you receive a notification and you can continue with that localization process. All right. Let's spend the last 10 minutes here looking at the CAT editor. I did also want to mention that my colleague Giorgio did a webinar recently on the linguist view and using the online editor, which here I'll show right now, and all the features for linguists. So please check that out on our website under webinars. So here is our web editor, and as some of you may be very well aware, it's very similar interface as other CAT editors. It presents you with a bilingual view broke down in a segmented basis, right? So here you can see different matches either coming from a machine translation engine. So this one, if it's underlined, it comes from machine translation. If not, it comes from my translation memory. So below, I have my in-context preview, so I can show the source or the target. Above, I can see my different associated translation resources. So my translation memories, term bases, or empty engines. If I click into this segment, below here, you can see, and let me pull this up a little bit, that this came from my marketing TM. If I select here, you can see that Phrase Translate selected NextMT as the best MT engine for this domain and language pair, and it pre-translated according to that selection, and that's based on AI. Let me just move this up again a little bit. I can search within a translation memory as well. And you can see the term base and TM matches applied here. I can run my QA checks. So from here, you can see it flagged that I had a missing term. So I'll be prompted to go ahead and fix that. You can see the changes from workflow step to another based on the changes made from one workflow step to another. You can also do it here So if I select now I've completed the translation. Now I'm in the QA workflow step of this project. I can download and export my workflow changes. So you can see here, I can easily see what changes have been made. I know that's important from a project manager perspective to see and compare changes from one workflow step to another. So you can export it here, or you can see it directly within the editor. Here, if you want to look at matches from other languages and other associated with this project, you can do so if you speak that language. You also can tag and add comments for colleagues. So if Bob, proofreader, is the next person in my workflow and I want him to check something, I can tag him. And he will be notified. Additionally, when Bob comes in and sees my comment, he can reply back to me and I'll be notified, right? So it adds to a nice little collaborative environment in the editor, right? So you can be able to collaborate across linguists within one given file and within the web editor. And then LQA, I've already run my LQA here. So I want to show you, let me do this one. So I have my LQA score here. LQA is linguistic quality assessment. So if that's part of your process and you want to see the quality from your translation providers, you can do so directly within the editor. So I'm going to click into this one here. And I'm going to accept it. And from here, I can run my LQA. I'm going to start my assessment. So this would, your LQA profile would be predefined in your project settings, or excuse me, in the settings overall within TMS. So let's say for this one, I want to flag a terminology error and set it to minor, major, critical. I can do so here. I can tag a colleague again and say, this is wrong, for example. I'll flag the issue. I can write my overall feedback here and then finish that. And then let me refresh here. And you can see I have my quality scores here for these different languages. I can click directly in it to see what the LQA score is. I can download the LQA scorecard. I can email the LQA scorecard directly to my linguist or whoever I need to. So those of you who are familiar, it's based on the MQM standard, but here's the scorecard that gets an example, right, of what gets sent to linguists. How am I doing on time? All right, one more minute. Workflow changes, I'll go over real quick the different options. If I go to my actual project here, and let's just complete this here. This is the one I submitted from the customer portal here. My project, let me close out of these here. I'm going to force complete these so I can do a round trip. So you as a project manager have the power, right, to, if you have access rights, to force complete jobs and move them along. So if I refresh, you can see that now the translation step's completed. It's moved me along to my quality assessment step. From here, again, I have the power as a project manager to force complete these. And my project's been completed. Here we go. And if I go now to my files for translation, this is where I pulled my dog and cat cafe. You can see here's the Italian, refresh again. That's the translation here. If I have multiple languages, it will create different sub languages as well. So here's my French appearing. So it puts your files right back into the file repository that you were in or that you uploaded from previously. So there was really a lot. Phrase TMS really has a lot to offer, a lot of really, really cool features, especially regarding the continuous localization process and the automation surrounded around that, right? So it really does make your life easier as a project manager for automated project creation, and also to set predefined settings, right? So you can automatically send translation to your linguist. So I think, Clara, am I good? Are we ready for Q&A?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Alicia. This was amazing. You've managed to show really a lot in the time given. Before we jump to the Q&A, and we have some good questions already, so thank you everyone for submitting them. I would like to first invite you again to the webinars that Alicia already mentioned. So next week we are doing the same concept as today, but we are introducing our different pillar of our technology, the phrase strings. So if you're interested, please join us there. And also, if you're interested more in the point of view of a linguist, a translator, you can watch our on-demand webinar where we introduce the phrase TMS from the perspective of a linguist. You can find all of our webinars on phrase.com/resources/webinars. And now let's start with all the questions. First of all, let me start with this one. Anna is saying, thank you for such a nice webinar. So thank you, Alicia.
Thanks for joining.
And now with the questions, Michael is asking regarding machine translation, when relying on a mix of MT and TM inputs, are there best practices to pre-translation? For example, anything above 75% match goes from MT, the rest relies on the TM. Pre-translate with such settings, or rather leave all segments blank for translators to work out from suggestions.
Yeah, so there are different project settings you can have in the pre-translation settings to enable it how you see fit. But the best practice is to first pre-translate from your translation memory first, right? Because those are quality matches that have already been pre-approved by linguists or by, in-country reviewers or in-house client reviewers, for example. So best practice is pre-translate from the translation memory first, and then any matches, depending on that threshold you've set, right, in your project template settings, it will then tap into the machine translation engine and pre-translate those rest of those segments. Let me see here. You can also leave those blank, right? And then just have those as suggestions, right, within the editor for your linguist. So there's a lot of different options on how you set your pre-translation settings. Hopefully that's kind of small here. So, all right, yeah, I think that's enough. If you have more questions on that, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you. And another question from Michael regarding vendor users. When assigning a job to an LSP who has set up as a vendor with their token, may we ignore the single usernames already created, probably from before, and they get to work on the job and internally assign as they need? Or are we okay to delete the specific end usernames?
So there is a setting, and let me just read this again. So that we may ignore the single usernames already created and they get to work on the job. Yes, exactly. So when you share a job in TMS to a vendor who already has their Phrase TMS organization, once you share it with them, they're able to assign it internally to their own linguistic team, right? So they have certain options within once you share it with them. So for example, they can't edit, your translation memory or term-based that are part of the original project settings, but they can reassign internally. They can add their own machine translation or their own translation memories as well. But there is a setting as well under access and security where you can remove or have the names not displayed, right? The linguist's name within the editor. So that is an option. And hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Next question from Grigory. When you edit the dog and cat cafe file to the submitter portal, it reported more words for French compared to Italian. How come? Wasn't it the same file for both, or is it counting target instead of source?
That is a great question. And actually, I'm looking back on my project right now. So in the submitter portal, yeah, 71 words for French and 62 words for Italian. So it depends how your analysis settings are set as well within the project template. So exactly here, it was counting target words based on my predefined settings for one language versus source term. So there's a lot of options within your project template settings, how you want analysis to be set versus source or target, for example. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thanks. Maria's question, is there any way to automate translation memories, perhaps as part of a template, to have them add new target locales automatically when you create a project into a target language that's never been used before for a given client? Or is creating a new translation memory our only option in such a case?
So in a project, you can predefine translation memories. You can also set it within a project to create a new translation memory based on a new language pair. So at the end of a project, it'll automatically create a new translation memory based on, a new language pair. So let me see here. Or is creating a new TM. our only option. No, so yeah, as I just mentioned, there's the ability within an actual project to create a new one based off of that actual project. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great. Thank you. Back to Michal. Can workflow steps be customized on per project level, e.g. translation editing, post editing, I think review 1, review 2, review 3?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And as I mentioned previously, you can create as a project manager your own workflow steps, and you can name them however you see fit. And you can have up to 15 workflow steps in a project. So you can name them TEP, you can do review 1, 2, 3, however many rounds of client review you might have. So yes.
Thank you. Another one from Maria. Is there any way to make tag content visible for linguists so that they can see if a given tag is a format tag, a hyperlink, an image, or something else?
Yes, absolutely. And you may or may not have seen that in my demonstration, but yes. So it'll show as a placeholder within the web editor for the linguists. So they know not to alter that tag. If they do, it can be flagged in the QA checks and they're prompted to fix it.
Perfect. Thank you. A question from Dora. Thank you for the detailed webinar on MemSource. It was really interesting. Let's just here say that MemSource no longer exists. We have rebranded to Phrase TMS. So it will have been a year in a bit. So thank you, but we are called Phrase TMS now, what you used to know as MemSource. Thank you. Julia, can you lock out HTML tags so linguists can move them around without inadvertently editing them?
Yes, you may. So similar to the tag question previously, you can have those locked out as placeholders within the editor. One thing I did not show are file import settings. So you can set HTML import settings when you create new jobs, so that way linguists can't alter them as well, and it converts them perfectly for PhraseCat editor. So yes, that's an option.
Thank you. When trialing Phrase TMS, I noticed an option for custom checks. Does that mean that we can run a list of regex checks automatically before delivering the file?
Yeah, there is the option to configure your own workflow steps using regex. Yes.
Thank you. When you mentioned alignment, you said that we could have a linguist take a look into our alignment efforts to confirm that it looks okay. How do we do that? Can we create an alignment project? Can we export a file?
Yes. So as part of alignment, it's great, right? Because you can tap into existing content that's already been translated, but as part of that alignment process, you really do want to have a linguist verify that the segments match, so that way it's imported correctly into your translation memory, right? If they're not, then you're going to run into segmentation issues, translation memory matches, and your translation memory can just, the quality declines, right? So that's very important. So yes, you can have a linguist look at your QA file because it's created in TMX. You can have it look at, do the alignment in the CAT editor. You can export it in Excel or TMX. So there's a lot of different options. And, if you're already a customer or a potential new customer, reach out to us and we can talk to you about best practices depending on your use case.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And lastly, Michal says, big thank you for today. And yeah, I would add to that. Thank you so much, Alicia. It was amazing. Thank you for the demo and for answering all the questions. So I think this is a wrap. We are done. If you have any feedback for us, please fill in a survey that will pop up right after we close this session. You can let us know even about your suggestions for some future topics for our webinars. And yeah, I hope to see you again at another webinar very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.